help is on the way. If he will fail to keep his promise, it will be a great damage to his reputation. More than 20 senior commanders in his leadership of the army are with jihadi background. Hezbollah is one step ahead here because there are efforts that it's not happening. It's either not enough or not happening at all. One example is...
Thank you for making the time to engage with this report. To watch future reports without advertisements and to stay informed with the latest insights from Jimmy Evans, Mark Hitchcock, and experts from around the world, and for only $7 a month, I urge you, become a subscriber at endtimes.com. Sign up today. Reporting from Israel for endtimes.com, this is Brian Schrager. 20 months ago, we sat down with Lieutenant Colonel Sarit Zahavi in the Upper Galilee, only 6 miles from the Lebanese border. At the time, Hezbollah had been firing rockets into Israel almost every day for 8 months. Northern communities in Israel had been evacuated, entire municipalities turned into ghost towns, schools abandoned, shopping centers vacant, streets empty. Those that remained a few miles south of the Lebanese border were subjected to a never-ending barrage of rocket alerts with no more than 15 seconds to reach safe rooms or bomb shelters. Children in the north were in and out of school. Daily life was an unending drama. This was the reality in northern Israel for more than a year, almost 14 months that felt like an eternity. As the founder and president of Israel's Alma Research and Education Center, Sarit and her family stayed for the duration. For her part, Sarit and her colleagues at Alma continually researched and supplied intelligence to Israel and its allies, especially in the United States. Today, we once again sit down with retired Lieutenant Colonel Sarit Zahavi. How are things looking now? Is Hezbollah, the so-called Party of Allah in Lebanon, defeated? Is Syria becoming a safe country? And of course, what about Iran? Please note, so that you do not miss a single word of this important conversation, I have burned English subtitles onto the interview. Join me then as we discuss all these things and more with Sarit Zahavi. Hi, Sarit. Thank you for meeting up to do this. I really, really appreciate it. It's been a while. You and I met face-to-face about, almost 18 months ago. A lot has happened since then. It's good to see you again. It probably won't hurt for our viewers to be reminded who you are and what you do. Who are you?
I'm the founder and president of the Alma Research and Education Center. We are focusing on Israel's security challenges on the northern borders. I am based 9 kilometers, which is about 6 miles from the Israeli-Lebanese border. I was an intelligence officer with the IDF. I served for 15 years with the IDF. And when I ended my service, I established Alma. I'm a retired lieutenant. And basically, that's my life mission. This is what I do. I provide information based on open source intelligence from Arabic mainly about what's going on in Syria, in Lebanon, a little bit in Iran, and things that are happening over here because it affects our life. And eventually it affects other people's life, like those across the ocean.
Indeed. And the organization you founded is called Alma, is that correct?
Alma, yeah.
Alma, yeah, and it is on the internet, I think, at israel-alma.org. So Alma, you and Alma are kind of primarily known for analyzing what's happening in Lebanon, especially with respect to Hezbollah, and Syria, which have been somewhat absent from the news, at least in the last couple of weeks, because all of the attention has been on Iran. Will Trump attack? Won't he attack? What's going to happen there? Will Israel participate? And I don't know about you, but in this side of the country, down in Jerusalem, we've been anticipating going back to the bomb shelters, hoping we won't have to, but going to bed at night with a bathrobe nearby and our phones plugged, fully charged, and wondering if we'll have to go back down. Primarily, you focus on Lebanon and Syria, but you've also done some research with respect to Iran. What are you seeing about Iran before we jump into Lebanon and Syria?
We mainly looked at the military level, the IRGC. We published few reports about the IRGC. It's the Air Force, meaning the ballistic missiles array, the nuclear facilities. We published about 20 videos under the title Eyes on the Ground. We don't have eyes on the ground, but we have a very skillful analyst that succeeded in finding good visuals of how the missile sites and the nuclear sites in Iran look like. We just published another one that shows how it looked like now after many of them, but not all of them, were attacked last June. And so we do have a good understanding about the IRGC and the threats that it poses, and basically about what needs to be attacked now if the Americans truly want to create a change in the balance of power in the Middle East and a change in the security for us, Israelis and others that are close to the American interests.
So what do you think? Is the U.S. going to attack Iran or not? Do you have an opinion?
I don't know, because I'm not an expert to Trump's administration, but I want to tell you something about how we feel here, the Israelis. Trump made a promise. He didn't have to make a promise, but he did. He said help is on the way.
Yeah.
There is only one way to understand this sentence. Help is on the way. If he will fail to keep his promise, it will be a great damage to his reputation that was built very hardly in the past year and a half. That's one thing. Second, I do understand the dilemma, because there is hardly an opposition inside Iran that can lead the Iranian people afterwards. There is an opposition, of course. They went out to the streets and they were killed for that. But the leadership is so intimidated that it had to leave the country. And this poses a huge question of what will happen afterwards. And I know that Americans have bad experience with Afghanistan and in Iraq. But here is my question. If America wouldn't be involved in Afghanistan and wouldn't be involved in Iraq, what will happen in those countries? What would have happened? These two countries today would have been holding hundreds of ballistic missiles, probably with nuclear capabilities and chemical weapons. And all of that was prevented with a lot of chaos and a lot of blood, but it was prevented. And we have to do the same thing with Iran. We have to take the risk that after the regime fall, there will be chaos in Iran and there will be instability in Iran. But at the same time, the Americans can completely destroy the missile program and the nuclear program and the proxies program. And that's why it's so important to do that. By the way, if you don't mean to do that and America doesn't have enough targets or intelligence to do that, it better not, because to leave the Islamic Republic as it is, and to leave the ballistic missiles capability as it is, and to leave the nuclear, whatever is left from it, and I believe not too much, but to enable them to develop it again, and it will create a more dangerous situation for the Middle East and for the Iranian people, because they will oppress them much more brutally. So I think that it's a crucial point now. It's a historic point, and we have to be very, very thorough, consistent, and brave, and we have to do it. And I'm saying that as an Israeli, while in opposed to most nations in the world, we know that once there is an attack against Iran, we are at risk to be attacked back.
Right.
We know that.
Yes.
But we understand that the other option is the alternative is much more dangerous. Is much more dangerous. If they will continue with their ballistic missile program and they will succeed in reviving their nuclear program, which again, it suffered a lot of damages, in 10 years, we will have to attack anyway.
Yes. Yeah.
Maybe less than 10 years. I don't know.
Concern has been that if Iran launches a preemptive or counterattack, that it will bring in its proxies, Hezbollah to the north of Israel and the Houthis in Yemen to the south. One of Alma's main is Lebanon, is Hezbollah. What's happening up there? We're not hearing a lot about Hezbollah or Lebanon lately, but it isn't quiet. It isn't peaceful, is it?
We published 2 reports of the reconstruction of Hezbollah, and another one is on the way about what IDF is doing versus the reconstruction of Hezbollah. And the basic conclusion of all of that is that there are a lot of difficulties on Hezbollah's way to reconstruct its military capabilities, and also the civilian infrastructures like rebuilding the communities that were destroyed next to the border, etc. But at the same time, Hezbollah didn't give up its motivation. And when we try to compare the IDF efforts to prevent the reconstruction process towards the Hezbollah efforts to reconstruct its military capabilities, we understand that Hezbollah is one step ahead here, because there are efforts that it's not happening. It's either not enough or not happening at all. One example is the commanders and leadership level. Only 20% of the Hezbollah military operatives that were killed in the past year or so since the agreement for ceasefire. Israel is attacking twice a day in Lebanon on average. Only 20% are seniors or interim, what we call interim level, those who are field commanders. And this is not enough. We need to make sure that Hezbollah cannot make decisions. We need to make sure that Hezbollah cannot train and Hezbollah cannot fight. And this is among the level of commanders and leadership, which is hardly damaged. The same goes to manufacturing facilities. Israel attacked them in the past year, but very little. And Hezbollah is working around it to continue to attack, to continue to build manufacturing facilities for drones and precision-guided missiles in Lebanon, smuggling only the components. Hezbollah today can no longer launch an invasion of thousands of Radwan brigades, which is the elite unit of Hezbollah that was supposed to launch the invasion to Israel, just like Hamas, and was fully prepared on the borderline. But at the same time, by the way, the Radwan brigades today, the majority of them are based north of the Litani River, meaning more than 20 kilometers in most cases. Okay, the border is complicated, but in most cases, more than 20 kilometers from Israel. So there are a lot of difficulties, but they still exist. They still train. They still nominate new commanders under those who were killed. And they didn't give up the project. The project is there. The Lebanese government is far from doing enough to disarm Hezbollah. What you hear out there in the news in America, that the Lebanese armed forces disarmed Hezbollah, we don't see evidence for that. Lebanese armed forces published maybe 6 evidence. They claim that they disarmed 10,000 rockets. Where are they? What types of rockets? Where did they find them? We don't have any information around that. They don't publish any information around that. And if I'm just comparing that to the information that IDF published during the war about the weapons that it found only in the very small areas around the borderline, this is completely different. It's like a huge amount of weapons that we found, and we can say in which villages, and we can say what type of weapons and what's the ranges of the weapons, etc. The Lebanese armed forces is not doing all of that. And even with, with the issue of building the trust, how can you build the trust with the Israelis after everything that happened to us? We had 60,000 Israelis that were evacuated for a year and a half from their houses. We are still struggling to rebuild the communities. We are still struggling with our psychological effects. So we are still struggling to rebuild the communities in the Israeli side of the border, communities that were attacked. We didn't initiate the attack against Hezbollah. We were attacked, October 8, 2023. And we are still struggling to recover from the psychological effects. Children that didn't go to school or hardly went to school for 2 years.
Yeah.
And adults that like myself, that experienced the war and had to run for bomb shelter in 15 seconds for so many times, or watching the war from the balcony. The Lebanese need to understand that they have to rebuild the trust, and they have to truly prove what is being done to disarm Hezbollah. And this is just not happening. In fact, there are two ministers that were nominated by Hezbollah in the Lebanese government. And one of the senior advisors to the Lebanese president for the reconstruction of Lebanon after the war, he's a Hezbollah member.
It seems that President Trump's team is hoping that Lebanon's government will somehow be able to neutralize, if not eliminate, Hezbollah. But Hezbollah is continuing to integrate itself fully into the government and into the military. It doesn't seem like a very optimistic scenario, at least for the Lebanese government, to take care of Hezbollah.
There are many good people in Lebanon that are against Hezbollah. Shiites, Muslim Shiites, which is the natural base of Hezbollah, and others, and Christians and Sunnis and Druze that understand that Hezbollah is actually burying Lebanon for the cause of the Islamic Revolution. But on the other hand, those players are not willing to clash with Hezbollah. They are traumatic from the civil wars in Lebanon. And since they are not willing to clash with Hezbollah, Hezbollah is winning here, and they are losing. And I'm saying that very, very sadly, because I see this again and again and again.
Yeah. Speaking of the psychological effects that under which you lived with daily rocket attacks, it reminded me shortly after you and I had our first meeting 18 months ago, I was back in Katsrin going on a walk around the city when rockets appeared overhead. And I could see the fire trails, and there wasn't a shelter to go to. I suppose I could have been hit by debris. Thank God I wasn't. But I thought about you when that happened, living with this every single day, and the psychological impact that has had. And that's been the case all across the North. And my impression is that most of the communities that were abandoned during the war have returned. Is that true? And if so, how are they doing?
We have about 80% that came back, but there are communities that it's much less than that, and there are communities that it's more than that. So, there is a huge diversity here in the Upper Galley, and it's really depends on the specific community. What didn't come back is the community life or the business life, economic life, social life. This is still not happening. It will happen. I truly believe it will happen. I believe in the people of the Galilee that will rebuild the communities, but it takes a long time. And, it's step by step, day by day to build it. And it's a challenge. I can tell you it's a challenge. And what is happening now in the past few weeks, we started from Iran, the fact that we are all holding our breath to see what will happen and whether we're going to be in a situation of war again is not helpful with the reconstruction project.
Right. And I've especially been concerned about children and young people and the effect that this has had on them. You've mentioned they were at least officially out of school for 2 years, being homeschooled or being educated remotely.
They went in and out, 3 months in, 3 months out. When they went to school, they couldn't go out in the breaks. They had a lot of limitations, or they studied in shifts. It was.
In general, how are children doing, or young people?
I think that the children are stronger than the adults. Like they have more resilient. Truly, if I'm looking at my children and I'm looking at their friends, eventually children want to be happy and they're much more optimistic. And also, they don't know everything that I know. At least I don't tell them.
Not true. Yes, knowledge is difficult.
I can tell you that to travel in the border communities and to hear the sound of children again, it is one of these moments that you say, okay. And it is happening. It is happening in many of them. Not all of them, but in many of
them. I remember when we last spoke, you mentioned there was a severe shortage of bomb shelters in the north. Has that been corrected, or are more bomb shelters now available?
Yes. If you will travel now in the communities on the borderline, you will see that in each and every one of them, there is a project of building safe rooms to the houses. And next to each house that didn't have a safe room, or almost all of them, the Israel is now building safe rooms. Yes, it's a project. It's not ended yet, but it is now happening.
Well, let's move over to Syria for just a minute. Jolani has moved in with his new government, HTS. Dressed in a suit, he looks very nice. Looks very appealing to the West. He's not wearing the thing around his head or long robes. So he looks very Western. And Israel, I think, very much to its credit, in this case, secured a buffer zone so that it does not have Syrian rebels or Iranian representatives or Turkish ones on its border. But in your opinion, what is going on? Is this a government we can trust?
I want to say a few things. First, I want to say that I think that if I'm including or calculating the American approach towards Syria, comparing to the American approach toward Lebanon, we are in a much more problematic situation with Syria. I am much more worried about that. In both fronts, the military achievement is huge. In both fronts, military were degraded. Like in Lebanon, it's 80% degradation of the amount of rockets, as an example. And in both fronts, there are still capabilities to carry out terrorist attacks. That Israel, as you said, there are IDF soldiers in Syria, and there are IDF soldiers also in 5 hills in Lebanon that are watching the communities on the Israeli side and the communities on the Lebanese side and making sure that nobody is crossing. But at the same time, there is completely misunderstanding in what's happening in Syria. And I am very much worried that in 10 years, we are going to see a completely different Syria. And I want to explain. Among Israeli researchers, and I believe also others, Syria was considered a secular state.
Mm-hmm.
Assad was a dictator, a brutal dictator, the butcher from Damascus, but he was considered not motivated by religious reasons. His friends were very much religious, which are Hezbollah and Iran. Now, when in the Middle East, when you involve Islamic radicalism into politics and militarism, eventually you get terror. This is not moderate Islam in our northern neighborhood, okay? Maybe in other places you can see it, but not in those areas that I'm talking about, unfortunately. In Lebanon, Hezbollah is a radical Muslim Shiite. And in Syria, we see growing effect of Al-Qaeda ideology, ISIS ideology, things that didn't exist in Syria 15 years ago, or 20 years ago, or hardly exist. Okay. Now, how Ahmed Ashara is part of that? I'll give you a few examples that we learned about them only in the past few months, and that way I changed my mind about who this guy truly is. First, I don't know if anybody heard about it. Ahmed Ashara is building a net of schools, elementary schools and kindergarten, all across Syria through the HTS. HTS is the branch of Al-Qaeda in Syria that was considered and designated as a terrorist group. And a few months ago, the Western world decided that it's no longer a terrorist group. But the ideology is still there. And now schools of HTS are being built all across Syria. He already built 70 schools, half of them in the past year. Damascus, Homs, southern Syria, Idlib, of course, and is educating the future generation of Syria to become radical Islamists. This is not just Islamic education, which we have in Israel as well. This is something completely different. So this is one thing. Second, if you look at the leadership and you go to the military leadership, and you see that more than 20 senior commanders in his leadership of the army are with jihadi background. So he nominated his closest friends. Again, he was a jihadist, or maybe he still is a jihadist. Okay? He nominated his closest friends to lead the Syrian army. When you're looking at the 1 year for the revolution celebrations, the anniversary, you see anti-Semitic chantings there. Not just a hate to Jews, calls to kill and extinct the Jews. Okay, of course, in a radical Muslim language. this is what we heard coming out of there. Support to Hamas, defining Israel as the greatest enemy. Last example, maybe. There was a forum in Doha that was arranged by the Qataris, which are the sponsors, of all these projects. And the forum, by the way, was sponsored by Western platforms. And Ahmed Ashara was interviewed by Christian Amanpour. And she asked him the question that all of us want to ask him. She asked him, are you a terrorist? People are saying that you are a terrorist. Are you a terrorist? Now, I expected that according to everything that happened recently, what he would say is that I was young and stupid. I am sorry for that. Again, HTS claimed responsibility for around 600 terrorist attacks in Syria during the years of the civil war in Syria. 600. His answer was, a terrorist is a political stance today. The terrorists are those who are killing innocent people in Iraq and Afghanistan. I'm quoting. He actually meant America and Great Britain, and he also talked about Israel and Assad, which I agree with him about Assad.
Wow.
This was his answer. He didn't deny, he didn't apologize, he didn't say he's sorry. No, he blamed the Americans for being the terrorists.
Wow.
And it's available for everybody in YouTube, in English, no problem.
Well, thank God the IDF is keeping a very keen eye on things there and has established that buffer zone, unlike we've had with Lebanon. And hopefully they will maintain that and stay there.
I want to say something about this buffer zone. We have 9 positions. We're talking about the buffer zone in the Syrian side of the border.
Okay.
First, let's talk about the size of it, If you have a map of Syria and you look at the size of the buffer zone, you understand that it's very, very, very small at the length of maximum very, very few miles into Syria. Very few miles. In some cases, it's less than a mile into Syria. That's one thing. Second, I want to say that buffer zone doesn't mean zero activity of terror. It means that every day Israel is fighting terror in those places, and it enables Israel to fight against terror in those places. I'm not saying that, it's 100% security, but it's much better than not being there. Right. Israel was willing to give up most of its positions in the buffer zone if somebody else will take it. Not Ahmed Ashar. Somebody we can trust, Not the UN. Somebody we can trust.
Right. Right.
There were negotiations around that. Israel was not willing to give up one position out of the 9, which is on top of the highest mountain in the region, Mount Hermon, that is watching 360 degrees, not only to Israel or Syria, but also into Lebanon and to the crossing routes between Syria and Lebanon, areas where Hezbollah is smuggling weapons into Lebanon. And that's why it's so important for us to be on top over there as well. So just for people to understand, when we are saying buffer zone, what does that really mean?
Right. This is not a big area. It always strikes me when I'm in Katzrin, because I'm up there periodically, that I am closer to Damascus in Katzrin than I am to Jerusalem. Much closer, actually.
Right.
It is a small geographical area in which we are living and operating. Sarit, is there anything else you would like to add that we've not discussed?
Maybe one last thing about Iran. Iran is very different from Venezuela. The Islamic Republic is very different from the Maduro dictatorship. Iran is very different from Venezuela when we speak about regime change. I'm not an expert of Venezuela, but what I can say about Iran is that if you get rid of the supreme leader, Khamenei, you are not going to create a thorough change in the Islamic Republic of Iran. The system will survive this. The IRG will survive. Khamenei is very old, is close to 90 years old.
Right.
The system is prepared for the day that he will be gone and somebody else will replace him. So it will hardly affect the Islamic Republic. If we truly want to bring hope for the people of Iran, we need to target the centers of power of the Islamic Republic. It's not about just Khamenei, even though he is a problematic leader, very cruel, massacred his own people just last month. But at the same time, getting rid of him solely is not going to solve the problem, unfortunately.
How can we stay in touch with what you're doing, what Alma is doing, and the things that you're publishing?
Well, easily. In our website, you can have an access to our email, which is send us an email and we will add you to our mailing list, and you will get our weekly newsletter. We publish our reports daily in all platforms, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and on our website itself, which is israel-alma.org. And everybody is most welcome to be in touch with us.
Thank you, Sarit. It has been a delight to sit down with you again. Unfortunately, it could not be in person this time, but hopefully I will get up to your offices very, very soon.
You're most welcome.
Thank you, Sarit. For weekly intelligence updates from Alma, go to israel-alma.org. To follow Alma on Facebook, search for Israel Alma Center. On X, formerly Twitter, you can find Alma's regular posts at its handle, @Israel-Alma. On Instagram, search for Israel Alma Center. And on YouTube, you will find their channel by searching for @Israel-Alma. One last thing before signing off. There are a lot of Israel-related stories that do not make it into these weekly video reports. They range from biblical archaeology discoveries to human interest stories, on-location visits, behind-the-scenes insights, and tools for building your arsenal of defense for the world's only Jewish state, the apple of God's eye. To keep up with all these things and more, be sure to read the weekly dispatch from Jerusalem. Its title is From the Global Front in Israel. Last Friday's post includes a brief essay about Shia Islam's messiah figure, the Mahdi. And there is a spiritual warfare challenge to understand the battlefield on which all of us fight. Every issue of the dispatch includes at least 10 top stories from the week, spiritual warfare tips, and reports of anti-Semitic outbreaks around the world. Be sure to read, share, and use the information. Armor up. Reporting from Jerusalem for EndTimes.com, thanking God for you, and until next time, this is Brian Schroger.